welcome to another episode of Zoom with ZOA. This episode is entitled More Jew Hatred in Congress, Primary Elections to Watch, featuring Dan Pollak, ZOA Government Relations Director, Adam Turner, ZOA Government Relations Deputy Director, and it'll be moderated by Steve Feldman, Greater Philadelphia ZOA Executive Director. I'm Alan Jay, National Executive Director of ZOA. Thank you for joining us today. I want to start today's webinar by thanking President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu for having the courage to undertake the noble military action required to unseat the evil mullah regime in Iran. We continue to pray for the success of the United States and Israeli militaries and for the safety of our brothers and sisters in Israel who are taking missile fire and spending much of their time in bomb shelters. And I'd like to wish all a most meaningful, especially this year, Chag Purim Sameach, a happy Purim. I'd like to mention a few upcoming events before we get started. Our annual ZOA Florida Superstar Gala will take place 2 weeks from yesterday. That's on Sunday evening, March 15th. In West Palm Beach, Florida, we will be honoring Congressman Randy Fine from Florida, Pastor Hagee, John Hagee, founder and CEO of QFI, Leo Terrell, Congressman Brian Mast, and others. Registration is still open. Please go to ZOA.org where you'll find a prominent registration link. And on Monday, March 16th, we're hosting the first ZOA Women's Luncheon in Boca Raton. Please call the ZOA office if you'd like to join us. There's a handful of ZOA book club meetings in the pipeline, so please keep an eye on your ZOA email. All microphones will remain muted for the duration of this program. We have an awful lot to cover in the upcoming hour, and we're not certain if we will or will not get time to field questions. With that caveat, you're welcome to post questions in the Zoom Q&A feature, and in the unlikely case that will allow us to answer questions, we will take those. And only questions submitted in the Zoom Q&A feature will be considered. Steve Feldman has been Executive Director of our ZOA Greater Philadelphia chapter for more than 23 years. Prior to that, and concurrently with his work at ZOA, Steve has been a political columnist and a newspaper and radio advocacy journalist, and Steve has earned 8 national awards for his journalism. Steve is the advocate supreme. I often call on Steve when I need advocacy advice for myself or for constituents. And right now, I'd like to turn the program over to Steve Feldman.
Thank you very much, Alan. I don't know that I want the title supreme these days. It's not good for one's life expectancy, but thank you. Thank you, Jackie, for working in the background, getting us all working here. And I want to, it's very wonderful, I should say, to be with my colleagues, Dan and Adam, who you'll be hearing a lot from momentarily. Before we get to the subject at hand, which is very important, meaning the primary elections that are coming up, obviously, the United States and Israel have begun defending against Iran and Iran's aggressiveness. And we're going to spend a little bit of time at the outset, I hope you don't mind, our audience, talking about Iran. Dan is going to, and I think Adam is going to speak a little bit about Congress and what's happening with Iran on Capitol Hill. I'm going to speak a little bit about some advocacy items with regard to Iran. Dan, take it away.
So hi, due to the nature of the calendar, it turns out that this very well-planned seminar came at a time where there's a huge elephant in the room, and we're going to naturally refer to that. From the perspective of advocacy for Israel and for what Congress is doing, I just want to kind of summarize maybe some things you guys don't know about the way that the Democrats and Republicans are supporting and not supporting this war that Israel and the United States appropriately began against Iran. Of course, even putting it that way is incorrect. This is a reaction to the aggressiveness over the past 40-something years of the Iranian regime. And in no way should we agree that Israel started the war. They are responding to untold provocations from Iran. Just to be clear, the main, if those of you who haven't been watching the news, probably very few on this call, many Democrats say they support our troops, but they are very concerned with the way we have gone to war. just to be clear about the mechanism for their objection, there's going to be a vote on Thursday in the House on what's called a War Powers Resolution. In 1973, as part of a reaction to the Vietnam War, Congress didn't approve of the way President Nixon was doing things, and they passed a law of, frankly, questionable constitutionality, which says that the president can only commit troops under certain conditions. The part that may not be constitutional is Congress placing limits on what the president can do at all. As everyone knows, Congress in the Constitution has the right to declare war, and then the president would sign that resolution of war. That's the way we did things up until 1942, the last time that we've declared war in a formal sense on anyone by an act of Congress. Since then, it has evolved in Korea, Vietnam, each of the brush fire conflicts we've been engaged in since, that the president declares that it's in the national interest to do something, and Congress is not asked for a declaration of war. And that's what happened here on Saturday morning as well. So the actual law on this has never been decided by the Supreme Court, so it's unclear what the powers are. But as a practical matter, the president is free to commit troops when he thinks it's a national emergency. The letter of the law, if it is constitutional, is that Congress has to be informed within 48 hours, and then the president has 60 days to use force unconditionally. And after that, if there is a resolution prohibiting further use of force signed into law, then the president is not authorized to do it. So basically, there's a 60-day clock under the War Powers Act. This Thursday, the House is going to vote. We don't know exactly when the Senate is going to vote. There's a good chance, because of some Republican defections, that they could get a majority in either house, more likely in the House than the Senate. But there's no chance that the president would sign such a resolution, of course. And therefore, the War Powers Act will not have the force of law. And we won't probably hear the constitutional question resolved. But the effect of even a single House of Congress voting to disallow the use of force would be problematic for the United States. It would be a sign of disunity. On the Republican right, there are a few people, the so-called restraining constituency in the Republican Party, led by Rand Paul and some people that are out of Congress, who are pushing for the idea that this attack is not America first. Obviously, ZOA's position, if you heard Mort Klein last night, is that even if there were no Israel, it would be in America's interest for this war to go forward against Iran, who has been virtually at war with us the entire time. On the Democratic left, with the exception of Steve's Senator Fetterman, a more nuanced position from Jackie Rosen in the Senate, and in the House, Greg Landsman, most Democrats are saying that even if it's a good thing to attack Iran, the way the president did it was illegitimate and even unconstitutional. Jackie Rosen seems to be taking the absurd position that she's in favor of the attack, but wants to vote in favor of the War Powers Resolution. So anyway, that's the Democratic reaction so far. Again, we can take questions on that if we have time at the end, but frankly, we're not sure we will, because I've already gone over the time I was supposed to on this. Steve?
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for that briefing on the War Powers Act and what could possibly happen. Before we get any further, and I want to continue speaking very briefly about Iran and about advocacy, on behalf of ZOA, we want to mourn the American service personnel, the Israeli civilians killed so far in the war, and pray for a refuah shlema for all those injured Americans and Israelis. God should heal them. I want to speak a little bit about advocacy briefly with regard to Iran. It's very important because obviously people who are pro-Iran, anti-Jewish are very active, anti-American, very active. It's important to call the White House comment line and register your support for President Trump's action and encourage him to continue to put an end to the Iranian regime and all of its tentacles. Finish what you've begun, essentially. Please call into your local and national talk radio in favor of President Trump's actions and Israel's actions with regard to Iran. Call your local members of Congress, as Dan was talking about. It's important to weigh in and urge that they give President Trump the authority to continue doing what he's doing. It's important to post on social media about this. There's a lot of bad education out there, bad information. People don't remember what Iran did to America in 1979 and the thousands of Americans Iran has murdered and wounded. Post in talkbacks and comments and articles, letters to the editor, and make sure you talk to people, even strangers. Remind them of this history. Remind them that Iranian leadership chants death to America, very frequently refers to America as the great Satan, and all the assassination plots that they've attempted against President Trump, other American officials. So it's very important we inform and remind and educate people and always engage in advocacy. I also want to encourage everybody to support ZOA. Our voice is more important than ever right now. We're one of the few organizations taking these rational, centrist positions and speaking as passionately and clearly about these matters as we do. Your dollars amplify our voice, so please support us nationally and where there is a local chapter, Florida, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Detroit, please support your chapters. Now we're going to get into why we are gathered here today to talk about primary races. There are some highly contested races throughout America. Primaries matter. There are areas where there are contested primaries, areas where there are uncontested primaries. They matter. Where there is a contested primary, obviously, it sets the table for who's going to be on the ballot in the general election. Turnout is very important. The reason that Zohran Mamdani largely is mayor of New York was due to low primary turnout. The reason AOC is in Congress, the reason Jamal Bowman was in Congress, and several other figures, it was due to low turnout in the primaries. And it also hurt Eric Cantor, Congressman Eric Cantor, who was the second highest ranking Republican at the time from Virginia, did not get his people to turn out in the primary and lost on the Republican side. So it really matters. So we're going to be talking about some strategies. We're going to talk about some races as we get into this topic. We have a lot of ground to cover. We've selected 11 key races, House and Senate, Democrat, Republican primary. We hope we have time to get to all of them. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A. ZOA, we remind you, is nonpartisan, non-political. We take issues on positions and on issues, but not on individual candidates, nor are we a Republican or Democrat organization. We care about the United States. We care about the Jewish community. We care about a strong, mutually beneficial U.S.-Israel relationship, and that's what matters to us. We're going to get right into it right now. We're going to talk about the first contest is the New York State.
No, Steve, excuse me. Adam and I each had a short segment before we get into the race, remember.
Go ahead.
I wanted to, again, say that if we don't have time for questions, you're welcome to send questions to email for Steve, myself, or Adam. Maybe Jackie can put our email addresses in the comments. Mine is dpollak@zoa.org, but the others will be in the chat, I think, in a few minutes. What I wanted to say is we're going to be necessarily talking about some specific races, but we're going to paint some broad brushes here. In general, when we say that a Democrat, the vast majority of Democrats in the Congress consider themselves pro-Israel, and never let the fact that we're talking about some people who are less pro-Israel allow us to forget that fact. ZOA has its own definition of what it means to be pro-Israel, but some of the Democrats really would bristle at the idea that they're any less pro-Israel because they dislike a particular action of an Israeli government. At the same time, when we talk about the Democratic races, you're going to hear, in general, a certain relative discussion. The spectrum in the Democratic Party goes from a few individuals who are very pro-Israel, and it's a defining feature for them, and they don't make any apologies for it, to the massive Democrats who are living in fear of primaries from the extreme left. And those people who are still part of the Democratic big tent are absolutely anti-Israel and are doing everything they can in the current context to oppose the Iran war and to oppose AIPAC, who, as you know, ZOA has significant differences with. We're not going to spend this time to defend AIPAC, but it's a relatively significant litmus test. People who refuse to say that AIPAC is doing any good work are generally actually crossed over to the anti-Israel point of view. So there are many Democrats in the middle who used to be stalwart acceptors of AIPAC and have evolved into making a big show of their distance from AIPAC. That doesn't mean that they wouldn't support Israel in a particular vote, but it is kind of on the spectrum of the Democratic positions. On the Republican side, we have a new phenomena. A few years ago, it was virtually unanimous in the Republican Party that Israel was to be supported. Even the people on the extreme right were quiet about their hostility if they had it. That is no longer the case. And so we have a complete kind of libertarian, isolationist position in the Republican Party, which now basically makes its presence known by being against even small amounts of aid for Israel. The most extreme case, Massey, who's running for re-election in Kentucky, is someone who didn't even vote to wish Israel a happy birthday in the annual proclamation. And that's the kind of the extreme limit of it. A more principled type is Rand Paul in the Senate. We're not going to talk about him further, but he is truly against all foreign aid, and that includes the foreign aid from Israel. So I'm going to stop there for my part and let Adam say a couple of words about before we get into particular races.
Thank you, Dan. So I'm talking about New Jersey 11, which was the big news for us about 3 weeks ago. And of course, now it's not much news at all because of other things. But in New Jersey 11, which is a House district, the incumbent was Mickey Sherrill, and she just won the governorship in New Jersey, so it was open. And the Democrats had a primary. Actually, the Republicans did too, but there was just one candidate on the Republican side. So the district itself is ancestrally Republican, but now it's actually Democratic leaning. The favorite for this district was a Democrat named Tom Malinowski, who is a former two-term U.S. representative from a neighboring district. And the key thing that happened and that made the news was the fact that AIPAC, which we discussed earlier, has become more offensive-minded in primaries. They've gotten more involved. And they decided, for whatever reasons, that they were opposed to Tom Malinowski, the favorite. I can only speculate here, but he wasn't terrible when he was in the House, but since then he's been a little bit more left-wing. And he does have a background working in the State Department, which usually indicates a hostility to Israel. Not always, but usually. So anyway, AIPAC got very involved in that race. They actually spent $2.3 million against Malinowski. It's important to note that AIPAC itself is not a PAC, even though it says AIPAC. It's actually an organization, and then they have their own super PACs, and they put that money in the super PACs. So AIPAC spent that money. They were supporting another candidate in the Democratic primary named Tahisha Way, who is the former lieutenant governor of New Jersey. There were multiple candidates. There was another candidate named Brendan Gill, who was the machine candidate in New Jersey. And then there was a candidate known as Analia Mija, and I'm not sure I'm getting that right. but she is very much opposed to Israel. She's very much what we were talking about. She worked for Bernie Sanders. She has claimed that Israel committed genocide. She's very left-wing on economics and things like that. But anyway, AIPAC spent all this money, and when the election was actually held, Malinowski lost. He lost by 1,186 votes to Mija. And she won with 29.33%, so far from a majority. And she barely won percentage-wise over Malinowski as well, 29% to 28%, really. But she won. And by the way, I should make clear, this is for the special election. She now serves from now till January. So that's about 8 months. She has to run in the special election. Actually, she hasn't won the special general election yet. If she wins that against the Republican, whose name is Joe Hathaway, she then serves for about 8 months. Then she has to run again for the general election. From what we're hearing, the Democrats, one Democrat, Way, who was the pro-AIPAC candidate, may run, but she hasn't announced. On the Republican side, as I said, the current candidate is Joe Hathaway. From what we've heard, there's not going to be much of a push for him, which is unfortunate. I don't know if he's also going to be the candidate in the general election. So this is a real problem because this district is a moderate district, or originally was. And now they're going to have basically a member of the DSA, the Democrat Socialists of America, who is a confirmed Israel hater.
I think we have to
Adam, let's cut to the chase because we're really focusing on primaries here, and we don't want to spend too much on any one race. I'm sorry.
Sure.
But there was something else to be said, which Adam's going to quickly state about polls and the caveat on these primary polls. And that's
yeah, sure. So it is important. You're going to see a lot of, if you pay any attention to these primary races, you're going to see a lot of polls. And it's important to remember that a lot of these polls are junk. And a lot of these polls are done by people who don't know what they're doing. And other polls are done by the different candidates or groups backing certain candidates, and they will play with the numbers. So especially with the House race, which is very small compared to a race for statewide office, it's not going to be easy to poll this. And so a lot of times—
in summary, I'm sorry, polls exist, but they're extremely unreliable. They're not like the national polls that you have. Some of them are unreliable too, but we do the best we can at saying so-and-so has no chance. In many cases, it might be the case that the thing is so badly polled that a complete surprise can occur. With that, we'll move on to Steve, and we'll start on the 11 races.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Adam. And I just want to point out that whatever data that we are discussing during this event is based on reporting. We're not doing our own polling, of course. It's based on reports from the media, from candidates, from parties. So all of the information we're going to be discussing about the race is based on what's out there in the public domain. We're basing if there are any predictions or speculation, it's based on that. And without further ado, the first race we're going to talk about is the 10th district in New York State. Dan and Adam, take it away.
Sure, I'll jump in.
Go ahead, Adam.
So that is two-term Congressman Dan Goldman. He's a Democrat. It's a very heavily Democratic district. However, so Goldman is considered a moderate on the Democrat side. He is being opposed by a DSA member named Brad Lander, who was very close with Mondami. Not close enough to be appointed to something, but he's close. And Goldman originally won his first race in the primary by winning barely in a huge race. There were like 5 or 6 candidates. So he's still not secure. And Lander is now trying to challenge him. A lot will depend on how much money he can raise. But this is another crucial race, not so much because of Goldman, but because of Lander. Because Lander, as I said, he is Jewish, but he is very bad from our perspective.
And I wanted to add is both candidates are Jewish.
Yeah.
Goldman considers himself pro-Israel, but he's being attacked for being too pro-Israel. And like every politician, he has motioned towards mitigating that in some of the things he said. So he claims to be against the Netanyahu government and some of their policies. I think
And
that's it
both
for New
have
York 10, right?
And
And
this
both-
district is one of the most Jewish districts in the country, right?
No, New
Yeah.
York 12, which we're going to talk about, is the biggest Jewish district in
It's
the
from
country.
percent, yeah. But this is up there,
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
one of the bigger ones.
right? So that's New York State, and it's New York City we're talking about, and we're going to now go into the 12th district, which is the most populous Jewish district in the United States.
Let-
And
let
that's
me-
Jerry Nadler's.
Jerry
old-
Nadler, let me just pick up the thing about him. He used to be very close to ZOA at one time. We always had some disagreements with him, but he was a really staunch pro-Israel person. He has morphed into now being one of the leading critics of Israel in the House. Right before the Iran deal, he put out a position paper very similar to ZOA's talking points about what Iran must do, and then he came out in favor of the Iran deal. And that really was the breaking point. And since then, he's gotten more and more anti-Israel. Go ahead, Adam.
Sure. So he's retiring after many years.
Sorry, it's the
Right
Upper
now
West
they're-
Side. The
I'm
Upper
sorry?
West Side of New York.
It's a very heavily Jewish district. Once again, there's a huge crowd of candidates who are running. The one who's endorsed by Nadler is a guy named Michael Lasher. He's a state representative. He used to work for Nadler, and that's why he was endorsed. There's another state representative named Alex Boris. There is Jack Schlossberg, who many people probably know because he's the grandson of John F. Kennedy. There are a few other candidates as well, including George Conway, who is the prominent never Trumper former Republican who now is reinventing himself as a Democrat.
Can I just say, not only is he a Democrat, he came out against the Iran war, incredibly. Go on.
Yeah.
If the two of you know, given that it's the most populous among Jews in the United States, is there anyone who the Jewish community, not that we're monolithic, seems to be siding with? Is there any polling, any data based on that one?
Well, there's a few candidates that are Jewish because Schlossberg is actually
Oh,
Jewish.
but that doesn't really necessarily matter. Is there one?
Yeah, I would assume what we've been told is that Michael Lasher is probably the best of them. Not that he's particularly good.
But he seems to be the front runner.
Yeah, well,
based on
it's
what
hard
we-
to say he's the front runner because there are just so many candidates,
Yeah.
and there's another state representative too, and then there's Schlossberg, who's going to be well known.
Okay.
So, and they're all going to spend
The
money.
polling is inconclusive there. We don't have any report on who's really going to have the inside track. Several of these candidates have a viable possibility of winning, including a couple of the super anti-Israel ones.
Mhm.
And including George Conway, who's going to raise a lot of money.
And I just want to point out, we've mentioned DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, a few times so far. They're not a party; they're a membership organization. They're an organization of political activists, far left. I think officially they have an anti-Israel, anti-Jewish position. So it's important that they're not a party per se, not like the Working Families Party or some of these other parties. So when you hear that DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, that's what we're referring to. Now,
Still, from our perspective, they are people who affiliate with them. It's almost a given that they don't like Israel. They wouldn't be able to affiliate in the DSA. People have resigned from the DSA because they are so virulently anti-Israel.
Actually, Shree Thanadar did.
Right.
let's move to Pennsylvania now and the 7th Congressional District. This is
my home district.
This is a Democrat primary.
Yes.
It's the Republican incumbent right now.
The Republican incumbent is Ryan McKenzie. He's a freshman. He beat Susan Wild in the last race. There are a ton of Democrats running. The favorite, according to virtually everyone, is a guy named Bob Brooks. He is a firefighter union leader. He's also very tight and has been endorsed by Bernie Sanders. But strangely enough, he's also been endorsed by Governor Josh Shapiro, who's considered much more moderate than Bernie Sanders. There's several other candidates that are running. We talked to some people about them. None of these candidates have really said anything major about Israel-related issues. As I said, Brooks probably is the favorite now, but we don't know for a fact, and there's no polling I've seen.
Thanks. Now we're going to go ahead, Dan.
Our friends at the Republican Jewish Coalition consider this seat difficult for the Republicans to hold on to, even though Adam, who's a personal friend of the congressman, may differ. Right, Adam?
Yes, I do.
All right, we'll figure that one out in November, but let's get through the primary in May for that one. Now we're going to move to the Senate and Michigan. There's a hot Democratic primary in the state of Michigan for the Senate seat.
So yes, there are three major Democrats running for the Senate for an open seat. It was held by the Democrats, and one of them is named Abdul al-Sayed. And I know everyone will be shocked to realize that he's very anti-Israel. He is a physician, and he also was appointed to some state positions. He is squaring up against State Senator Mallory McMorrow. And the third candidate, and the favorite technically, although she's only up a few points in the polling, is a U.S. Congressman named Haley Stevens. Now, Haley Stevens is the pro-Israel candidate. She is going to be backed by AIPAC. As I said, Abdul al-Sayed is the worst candidate, and Mallory McMorrow is sort of in the middle. She sort of makes feints to both sides, like she hints there may be genocide happening, but then she won't go as far as to say there is genocide going. So it's really, in the polling right now, all three of them are pretty much in a dead heat. A few points separate them. The winner will go on to challenge former Congressman Mike Rogers, the Republican candidate, and he doesn't have a primary. Obviously, from any pro-Israel perspective, Abdul al-Sayed is the worst candidate for us.
Let me say something there, Steve, before this idea of a person can say genocide is possibly going on. ZOA considers, in the case of what Israel did in Gaza, calling it genocide can only be due to Jew hatred. It is, in other words, we don't accept the idea that some congressman is not really anti-Israel or anti-Jewish and still says there's genocide going on. The case against genocide is so obvious and clear that anyone who says it is in fact genocide is exhibiting Jew hatred.
And so that was a state senator.
Not only that, they're just a bald-faced liar. I mean, the statistics, it's just an outright lie in addition to being...
In fact, as you know, Steve, the Palestinian population in Gaza increased during the war in Gaza, far from it being genocide. And some people may know this, some people may not. The total number of Jews in the world now is just catching up to what our high point was just before the Shoah. That's genocide. So what we're seeing in Gaza is not.
Exactly.
Yes.
Thank you. And now we're going to move to a primary featuring an incumbent who's going to be speaking at the Florida ZOA Gala that Alan mentioned earlier. And that is someone who's become a favorite of the ZOA crowd, and that's Randy Fine, who's has a contested primary on the Republican side.
Sure. So Randy Fine has a few Republicans challenging him. Obviously, everyone in ZOA loves Randy Fine. One of his opponents is a particularly disturbing gentleman named Aaron Baker. He has already said very nasty, very incorrect things about Israel and Israel-related issues. For instance, he made the argument, which you'll see with a lot of very right-wing extremists, that you can't criticize Israel. Of course, he's criticizing Israel itself, but he says you can't criticize Israel, and he wants a country where you're able to do that. The good news for our side in this case is Randy Fine has already been endorsed by President Trump, and in this district, it's a heavily Republican district. That should propel him over this candidate, and there's a few others as well. But you never know, just because if there's no one that comes out, a dedicated minority could upset the incumbent in this case.
For
Now,
those of
once
you who are in
again,
Florida, please
Yeah.
come out and vote if you're in Randy Fine's district.
Yeah.
Some people may not know, Randy Fine wears a kippah. He's not ultra observant or anything. He started wearing it in response to October 7th as a sign that Jews shouldn't be afraid. He is extremely straightforward and outspoken on the issues we care about. But we don't
and
endorse him.
Dan, let me ask you or Adam, has Governor DeSantis endorsed anybody in that race or any of the other
It's
candidates
complicated
to
there.
succeed Governor DeSantis?
He does make endorsements, but there happens to be a bit of a feud due to the fact that Randy Fine was in the state Senate and before that the House of Florida, and he didn't exactly follow Governor DeSantis's leadership. So they actually don't get along very well, but I think DeSantis does not get overly involved in races that are likely to go that way.
It's actually even worse. Randy Fine endorsed DeSantis, and then he backtracked and he endorsed Trump. So DeSantis really doesn't like him.
For president.
Yes, for president. But DeSantis would never back Aaron Baker. DeSantis was a great congressman on our issues.
All right, let's move across the country to California, the 48th congressional race, district rather, I should say.
Sure.
And this again is a Republican contest.
Yeah, so this is a little different because it's California and they have what's called an open primary. So both Democrats and Republicans are in the primary. The incumbent here is Darrell Issa. He's a longtime Republican congressman. He's descended from a Lebanese Christian family too. So he's very interested in the Middle East. He's good on our issues. Because of the redistricting that they just did in California, his originally safe district has now become a very competitive one. And he has several Democrat opponents. He doesn't have any Republicans challenging him. But we're especially concerned about a guy named Amar Kampa Najjar, who is half Mexican, half Palestinian Arab. And not only is he a Palestinian Arab, but he is the grandson of a terrorist who grabbed and killed the Olympians, the Israeli Olympians back in 1972. So he is very dangerous. I mean, there's no other way to put it.
Just to add there, Adam,
Sure.
He has not condemned his grandfather's actions. So he is sympathetic. He says we should move on and talk about current issues, but he's never condemned any of that terrorism.
And his father was a PLO official as well. So he's the third generation of an opponent for Israel.
And is this an open primary or?
Yeah, it's totally open. So what happens
anybody
is
from any party and no
Yes.
party at all can
the top two
essentially
go
knock
on to
Darrell
the
Issa
general
out
election.
in the primary.
Again, if the votes go the wrong way, Darrell Issa can come in third, unlikely, I think, and then not even be in the general election.
Yeah.
There's no guarantee that a Republican even appears in the general election under California's system.
But it is most likely that Darrell Issa will make it because he's the only Republican there running. And it's most likely that this Amar Kampa Najjar will be his opponent because he's polling the best in the few polls I've seen. Plus, it should be added, he's dating Sarah Jacobs, a Jewish Democrat from California.
Too much information.
Yeah, but he's going to raise a lot of money because of it.
Okay, let's
And one more thing about money. I believe, I haven't seen the latest numbers, but Darrell Issa was, a couple of years ago, the most
unbelievably
wealthy
wealthy.
member of the House. Is that right, Adam?
Yes, he'll be spending a lot of money.
Interesting. We're going to move back across the country and back to the other chamber, the Senate, Maine. There is, interesting, troubling character running in that one, huh?
That's one way to put it. So on the Democrat side, to challenge Susan Collins, who's been, I think she's going for her 6th term now. But the two Democrats are Janet Mills, who's the current governor of Maine, who, however, is the underdog to a guy named Graham Plattner. And Graham Plattner has no prior political background except being an activist. He made some news not too long ago when it was found out that he had a death's head tattoo, a Nazi tattoo that he had on his chest, which he immediately apologized for and said he didn't know, and it was a drunken escapade. But since then, there have been many other incidents. He has
not only that, I'm sorry, Adam. We have extemporaneous accounts of people who were with him when he got the tattoo that says that he knew it was a Nazi tattoo.
Yes, it's his stories are ridiculous, and they're beginning to add up because many other things have happened in the past on Twitter and other communications apps. He said that he was a communist. He said that, he likes guns, but he's also a left winger. He has praised at least one neo-Nazi that I know of, Stu Peters.
Let me ask you, Adam, does he, with all of this outrageousness, does he, according to the polling we're seeing in the report, does he have a chance?
The most recent poll has him way ahead of both Mills and ahead, not as big, over Collins. However, I have read by some pollsters that I trust that oversampled his base, which are the very left-wing Democrats. Janet Mills, who's his opponent, as I said, is the incumbent governor. And she's popular with Democrats who are on the older side, let's put it. Okay. And this poll undersampled them. Right. However, if you put all the polls together and you do an average, he is ahead of Mills at this moment, which is
that sounds like a Polish joke. You'll pardon the pun.
Yeah,
the polls have him ahead. Let's move to our area, our chapter's area, the Pennsylvania 3rd congressional race. That's a Democratic primary. It's going to be an open seat in the fall. The incumbent Dwight Evans is retiring, and again, we have a large cast of candidates.
Actually, Steve, we were going to have you speak about that. It's your backyard.
Sure, it is my backyard. Thank you. I will tell you that I've really taken a deep dive into this contest because it is local. I follow a lot of the other contests we've been talking about, and I've been really almost shocked. I shouldn't be shocked how blatant the Jew hatred is. Now, we've been calling it anti-Israel, but to me, if you are against the largest Jewish community in the world and our homeland, and our well-being of our people and our homeland, to me, that's anti-Jewish. And some of the candidates are just coming right out and saying, I won't take any money from AIPAC. They're making that false genocide claim again, accusing Israel falsely of genocide, and that it's so open. It is a competitive race. There are several quote-unquote front runners. One of them, were he to win, and it is a deep blue seat, one of them, were he to win, would probably automatically be a member of the squad upon him being installed. So it is an important race. We will be. You
haven't mentioned anybody who's good. You want to say who's good?
I'm not endorsing, and we can't endorse anybody in that election. It's just very important that people.
Well, let me give the names.
Well, 1 second. One second, Adam, please. It is important that people go to candidates forums. There are many candidates forums, and ask questions about Israel, about the Jewish community, about support for a so-called Palestinian state, about support for Hamas, which some of these candidates have expressed, by the way. So if you want to mention names, Adam,
Well, I wanted to say that the one name that is most prominent is Street. Adam, go ahead and tell them about
Yes,
Street.
So he's a state senator, Sharif Street. He converted to Islam. His father was John Street, who was the mayor of Philadelphia. He is, I think you'll agree with me, Steve, bad, but not as bad as State Representative Chris Robb, who is the one you were talking about. Who would be the member of the DSA if he got elected. There's also another state representative, Morgan Cephas, and there is a doctor, David Oxman, who's running, who is a political newbie, and another few people as well.
Yeah, some of the candidates are very blatantly anti-Israel on their social media and campaign sites. Yeah,
the weird thing about this is that this anti-Israel stance they're taking is actually pandering. There's something really sad going on in the city of Philadelphia. And
Well,
Steve
it's
is an expert
dangerous.
at that.
I wouldn't call
Go
it
ahead.
sad, Dan. I would call it dangerous.
Yes, it's dangerous, but it's a fact that the reason that they're enunciating these horrible things is because it will get them more votes
That's true.
in the
That
certain
is correct.
communities.
Very
And that's
important to point out. Yes.
It's just a fact. We can't ignore it. Anything
That's
else to
why
say?
activism and advocacy really matters. Let's go back to New York State, the 4th Congressional District Democratic primary.
Sure. So that is Lauren Gillen. She's a one-term congresswoman, and she beat a Republican, so it's a competitive district. She actually attended our fly-in day. She is obviously a good Democrat from our perspective. She is being challenged by ex-state representative Taylor Darling, who was in the state house. Darling is another one of these candidates that hates Israel and has been Jew baiting. The good news is Laura Gillen is the incumbent. She has a lot of money. It's unlikely that Taylor Darling will have that much money, but you never know. It depends on what some of these big super PACs that are on the left decide to do. But Laura Gillen is certainly someone that we would respect. Her opponent, we certainly wouldn't. Whoever wins the primary will then go on to probably a competitive general election.
And since you mentioned that, Adam, a lot of these races we've talked about are either deep blue or deep red for the general election. So in some cases, the primaries matter more than other cases where there is a purple district or a purple state, and it could be, quote unquote, a toss-up in November. One of the reasons we're highlighting these primaries is because, as I said at the outset, they really do matter. People focus on the generals and really don't pay the attention due primaries. Let's get back into it. We're going to go to Illinois now, and one of the real anti-Israel members of the House, anti-Jewish, I would say, is retiring. So there's going to be an open seat. And let's talk about the Democratic primary.
Sure. So this is a heavily Jewish Democrat seat. Schakowsky is retiring, and there's a huge crowd of Democrats running to replace her. Right now, there's been a lot of articles about this race. It's very bitter and tough. There are several candidates. There's state senator.
Sorry to interrupt. The district includes Skokie, Illinois, if those of you who know Chicago.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So State Senator Laura Fine, Mayor Daniel Biss. There's also a left-wing activist named Kat Abugzaleh. I can't even pronounce it. Abugzaleh. She is, I believe, of Arabic descent. There are a few other candidates as well, but the three ones I mentioned are the ones that are leading in most polls. Once again, it's hard to know exactly who's on top. Certainly, AIPAC will be supporting Laura Fine. Once again, AIPAC doesn't do it directly. They set up super PACs, and the super PACs advertise, and a lot of times they're not even advertising on Israel-related issues. They're advertising on whatever else is important to Democrats. But there are two anti-Israel, anti-Jewish candidates. The Palestinian woman, I believe she's Palestinian, but there's also Daniel Biss. He is actually Jewish, but he has been, unfortunately, for the past few years, he's become more and more hostile to Israel and more bait or Jew baiting, basically, despite being Jewish. Right now, we really have no idea who's going to come out ahead. And this is certainly going to be a race that there's going to be a lot of money dumped into it.
I wanted to say something. As I did the research for this webinar, and Adam also, we usually focus on people who win the congressional seats. And in looking at some of these candidates, I'm appalled. It was quite disillusioning to see the many people who have such extreme positions who have a chance at becoming the candidate of a major party. And in some cases, in this district, for example, if they win the primary, there's almost nothing to stop them from winning the general election.
They will become the congresswoman.
And
or
so
congressman.
it's appalling and frustrating how far there's a thing in political science called the Overton window, how far it's moved. A few cycles ago, many of the candidates we're talking about would have gotten a trivial number of votes and no money, because everybody would have seen that there was no possibility of having them move to the national stage. That is not the case in a district like this today.
One more race we want to cover, and that's the Minnesota Democratic Senate primary. Gentlemen?
So that's an open seat. Tina Smith, the incumbent, is retiring. She has endorsed the more left-wing candidate, whose name is Peggy Flanagan, who I believe is part Native American. She is squaring off against a Congresswoman by the name of Angie Craig, who represents a more competitive area of Minnesota. The polling actually shows Flanagan ahead. However, Craig will probably have more money in the end. I don't think the polling is there's not much of a gap between the two, so it's still quite competitive. As I said, Flanagan is really left wing and would probably end up in the DSA.
So I think there are one or two comments that people made in the Q&A, Steve, that
Well, one second. I just want to
go ahead.
discuss a couple of things before we get to Q&A. And thank you both. That was wonderful summary of those 11 races. I thank you for the research and time you put into that. I want to talk a little bit about advocacy. There are closed primaries and open primaries. A closed primary, you must be a member of that party to vote in the primary. Open primaries are free-for-alls. Some states have things where you could be a member of a party or independent and vote. There's some hybrid situations. So it's very important that you understand the rules in your state, and these are set by the states and set by the parties within the states. It's important to be registered to vote. It's important to register strategically. If there is a primary contest where somebody good is running or somebody bad is running, obviously we want somebody who we consider quote unquote good. We don't want somebody who we consider bad to win the primary. So it's important to register strategically. And in most places, you can change your registration rather easily. It's not true across the board. It's important to find out. Encourage others to register strategically. Again, think strategically. Think like an advocate, like an activist. It's important. Consider volunteering to help a good candidate, so-called. And even if there is not much of a contest where you are, where either there's no primary or it's a formality, you can play a role in a campaign elsewhere. You can nowadays volunteer for a candidate, even though you don't live there. You can make a donation to a candidate, even though you may not be in the district or the state. So please think strategically. You have a role to play other than casting a ballot on election day. You need to be and especially in these times, an advocate, an activist all year round. Anything to add on that?
Just one thing. Component? If you're in a district where it's heavily one party or the other, and you want to make your voice heard, you can register in the other party, even if you don't agree with them, just to vote for who you want. And that doesn't require that you're going to have to vote with that other party in the general election. It just means that you get a say in the primary.
Right. Thank you.
I wanted to say something else, which is everyone has their own approach to what to do. I personally would never register for the other party. Personally, I'm just saying I wouldn't do it because I don't want to be identified in any way with some of the things they say. But everyone makes their own rules for this. There was a Democratic congressman who had a closed door off the record chat with ZOA's board a couple of years ago. And he said that he thought he was speaking to some people that had significant financial resources, that we were blinding ourselves to opportunities to stop people like Omar and other Democratic extremists from being nominated when we had a chance. He urged those people with political contributions to make contributions to the Democratic opponents of the people we dislike the most. And of course, this isn't on the record because he can't go on the record saying that. But I don't know that many of the people that were on the call, the ZOA type people, probably draw a line at making a contribution to someone who wouldn't agree with us on substantial issues. And it's an individual choice. You have to do what you think is best. What we're trying to make you aware of is what the stakes are and what some of the personalities are of people who would be potentially empowered if things go bad.
But again, there are strategies because somebody is going to be elected in November. We want as many people elected who care about our issues, care about our perspective, care about the issues and positions that we care about at ZOA. So it is important. I don't want to jockey with you, Dan, but people can participate strategically in these elections.
There's no doubt that's an option. I just said that everyone chooses for themselves,
sure, of course,
what course of action to take. I wanted to mention one or two of the Q&A things. We're not going to have a chance.
Well, I was going to ask a question from somebody in the audience right now, actually.
I'm not sure we're going to have time to actually get to the Q&As, but I wanted to touch on a couple of things people said. One of the persons made an excellent point that we're not going to end up winning by talking about Jew hatred as a thing. And I think that's extremely valid.
That's the question I was going to ask, yes.
As Steve said, we have to have a strategy. Just we, the Jewish community, have to be strong. This is why so many of us were not happy with the Super Bowl ad. Being a victim does not grant you some status. That's one of the big lessons of the recent past. It's not a contest to see who can be the biggest victim. Israel's showing that it's not a victim right now with Iran. They're winning the war. And that's what Zionism is all about. If you go back and read Jabotinsky and Trumbuldor, the great sages that predated us, that ZOA is based on, we are all about the positive message of Jewish affirmative, decisive action. And that's what we're at ZOA are about. And relatedly, I'm just going to touch on, go ahead, Steve, you can do it too. I'm going to touch on one other comment which was made. Why doesn't ZOA coordinate with AIPAC? Well, look, we're not going to do a commercial for AIPAC. They have their place. Those of you who are supporters of AIPAC in the audience, hey, that's great for you. I personally have not found, we had a parting of the ways some years ago when they, I feel very strongly about sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, as does ZOA, and AIPAC is not pushing for that. I feel very strongly about disempowering the PLO. And unfortunately, AIPAC has not given up on the idea of the so-called two-state solution. So we have real differences with AIPAC, but we're not here to trash them. They are a force to be reckoned with in this space, which is why we've mentioned them. If those of you find common cause with AIPAC in order to achieve the objectives of the Jewish people, that's your path. But we at ZOA, we have significant disagreements with several policies, and that's what I want to say.
Again, I want to encourage people to be advocates, activists, talk to some of these candidates, the ones who've not actually revealed themselves as completely antagonistic to the well-being of the Jewish community in Israel. Try and educate them. Maybe they don't know. Be their source of information. It's very important.
One other name I wanted to mention, a good news, a Democrat running, which we didn't make our list, but somebody said, is there any good news? And Elaine Luria, who was a congresswoman from Norfolk, Virginia, is the favorite to achieve the Democratic nomination there. And if she would be returned to the House, she's Jewish, a former nuclear-trained military Navy officer like I was, and I have a great deal of respect for her. But, you know, we don't endorse candidates. If we didn't say it enough times, we don't endorse, we don't even endorse a party. We're a non-political organization. Adam, you want to add anything before we're done with time?
No, except Elaine Luria her race will depend on whether they redistrict, which is up in the air right now.
I want to thank you all in the audience. I want to thank my colleagues. I want to remind you to please support ZOA. We do important work. We need your financial support to be able to do more and to continue what we're doing at this pace. I want to thank Mort Klein, our national president, and all of my colleagues for the work that all of us do throughout the year. And I want to thank those of you who are activists and advocates throughout the year for the important work you do. Please continue. Thank you for joining us. If you're in Florida on or around March 15th, March 15th, get to the Florida Gala. It's going to be a great event. Thank
One
you.
more thing, Steve.
Purim Sameach. Have a meaningful,
Purim,
joyous Purim,
we
everybody.
actually, somebody put in the comments, for him, Purim started on Saturday this year, which was an excellent point. But I was going to say, we're also going to have the ZOA annual mission to Washington in early June. Keep your eyes in this space. We're probably going to have it on June 9th, but we can't commit to that date yet.
Be well, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today.